All right, it's being appointed time and place and seeing quorum present. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you'd all please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Lynn, would you please take the roll?
Tony Arnett,
Here.
Mike Higgins.
Here.
Lori Holland.
Here.
Diana Johnson.
Here.
Tina Johnson.
Here.
David Schrader.
Here.
David Smith.
Here.
Doug Will.
Here.
Craig Wortman.
Here. Preview the agenda. Are there any items we need to change or rearrange?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Then this brings us to the first of two times on the agenda for public input. If there are members of the audience, either physically here or online, who would like to address the board at this time. See anyone here? Nope. Anyone online? All right. Then we will move on to announcements and recognition / communication. First up, for the high school student board representative, Drew was not able to join us here this evening, but he did provide some remarks that Mr. Kerr is going to relate to us.
I'm not sure if I can do Drew justice, but I'll try my best. This makes me feel a little younger, so I think that's a win. All right, this month at WHS. This week is World Language Week, organized by German and Spanish Honor Society. The clubs are selling chocolates and bracelets to celebrate. Last week was Student Council's Dude Be Nice Week. Students were greeted Monday with encouraging messages on Post-it notes like, "You got this," and "nice shoes." The week concluded with the naming of the staff members of the year, Ms. Jamie Klubertons and Mrs. Jen Devers of the Media Center. So shout out to them for all their hard work for WHS. They were very upset that they couldn't be celebrated in front of the entire student body versus over. I know they missed that, so that was a little sad. But this month's student Rotarians for the Watertown Rotary Club are Karis Johnson, Drew Scheid, and Lily Garland. Many German students took the National German exam last month. Jack Zelik earned a gold medal for scoring in the top 1% nationwide. Connor Hawes also earned a gold medal, and Brad Vick and Ava Lynn Clyde earned achievement awards. Students in the agri-science classes are starting to think spring planting has started in the greenhouse as the weather has improved. This month, seniors applied to the many local Watertown scholarships reviewed by the Scholarship Committee. The seniors will be given their scholarships in May at an assembly. Fall sports are wrapping up. In boys basketball this month, sophomore Calvin Hurchin's free throw with no time left gave Watertown 1 point up over the Beaver Dam Golden Beavers, beating them 61-60. In girls basketball this month, sophomore forward Alex Johnson scored 26 points, and junior guard Ellie Demet added 17 to lead Watertown girls basketball team to a 64-44 point victory in the last game of the regular season. The Watertown's boys swim team wrapped up the season with an 11th place finish at the Verona sectional. Future events coming up. The end of trimester 3 is just 2 weeks away. On Tuesday, March 7th, the juniors will take the statewide online ACT test. The rest of the grades will not have school on that day. The school musical Legally Blonde is happening on March 10th, 11th, and 12th. The musical, based on a popular movie, according to Drew Scheid, is very funny and filled with great music numbers. You will be able to see Drew in the performance if you choose to go, which is highly encouraged. Tickets are available now at goslingmusic.org. The Spring Fling, renamed Winterfest, is coming up. This is a fun day held by many clubs at the school and will include fun activities, food and drink, and arts and crafts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have an opportunity for board members who attended the State Education Convention, WASB Convention, to share anything that they learned or heard. Who would like to go first?
Sure, I can
Go
go
ahead, Tina.
first. Okay. Went to the state convention that was held in Milwaukee. I went last year as well, and I really get a lot out of it. Just because it's really geared towards, I'm amazed at the variety of topics that they offer and just how relevant they are. And so I have a little summary here for you that I'm going to share. One of the sessions that I attended was a WASB Superintendent Evaluation Framework. And they kind of went over like a process for continuous improvement. They stressed as far as Wisconsin law, and being that I'm on the planning committee, that was, I think that falls under that umbrella there. So I thought this would be helpful from that. Under Wisconsin law, it's like you have to do an evaluation the first year, and then every third year needs to be in writing. Must be based upon board updated written job description, and the evaluation must include observations of performance and unscheduled observations. So they went through some of the details regarding that. Another session I went to was Great Districts, Team and Trust from Boardroom to Classroom. And so this I thought was very interesting, just because one of the things they had said is that 1 million students have stepped out of public education, and theirs was like because of the lack of trust. So they talked a lot about, you know, when you have a new superintendent, and it's like, hey, we have one of those. You know, what you can kind of expect as far as like the first year is navigating their leadership and understanding the district. Second year is putting teams and systems in place. Third year is execute and implement change. So that I found helpful because I, you know, as far as like, oh, okay, you know, understanding what expectations, things like that might be. And then they also talked about do 3 things and then you can expect community support and engagement. And so they talked about community engagement, parent engagement, and in that realm, they talked about the clarity of superintendent roles and board roles. The second thing was shared vision for student success. And the third thing was an accountability plan. You know, and they went into details, you know, on each of those kinds of things. Within that framework of trust, they also talked about being a collaborative problem solver versus combative problem finding. And I found a lot of the things that they talked about too, like good, you know, just reminders for myself and communication and how we look at things and how we're working together. They talked about having goals and a plan and monitoring and measuring the outcomes. I was like, oh, wow, okay, that sounds great. Also, as far as like speeding up trust, as far as you give it away, start off giving it away, not from a viewpoint of you must earn it. They also said to seek a connection mindset. And also they said a one-day retreat will speed up trust. I had just have 2 more sections here, I think. They also talked about, I went to a session on strategic plan demystified. Because that's also part of you know, the section as far as the planning committee that I'm on too. And it was interesting because the things that they talked about, like we have a strategic plan, which was, you know, which is good, but it also challenged me to kind of think a little bit differently about it, from the steps of planning process. And they, you know, this is their information. I'm sure there's lots of different information and opinions out there. But as far as like, they recommend like pre-planning and like a stakeholder-driven process, establishing a foundation, examining the district's reality, written goals and objectives, and then the board and administrative work coming together to be able to communicate to the community and the different stakeholders as far as progress and things like that are concerned. What are you working on? What's not maybe working? That kind of thing. And then I went to a section on that is the question, developing effective questioning techniques. And so I thought they did a really good job, and this kind of tied into some of the other sessions I went to as far as a judging mindset versus a learning mindset. And so a judging mindset is more problem focused, blame focused, and a learning mindset is a little bit more open-minded. Help me understand, tell me more. Like I found those phrases to be helpful as we're, you know, learning more about things. And something that I might have heard a time or two is assuming positive intent and what are our choices. And just when you're talking about things, using facts and timelines are just very helpful to be able to put things together. And then they talked about governance as leadership. As far as generating, like, what are board norms, and having the, like, board evaluation process. But what I really liked in, in this section and the section that I went to on life readiness for the kids, for the students, is that they talked about this program that, what is it called? Empower You. And they gave an example of a school district because they really wanted to work on shifting their, they were focused on scores and mental health and how is all that, working together to be able to move the needle on student achievement. And so they said that they focused on student mental health, what we have, our why, and what we do. And so as far as, like, what we have, if the kids are well, the community is well. If the kids aren't well, the community and the adults are not well either. And so then they went into define our why. Like, what is the meaning of the higher goal and action steps, like equitable access for all kids? How do you discern what matters most? I know we've had some of those discussions as well. Evidence-based, accountability is the key. What do you know? What do you have? And this Empower You program took a look as far as it's a mentorship type program where they pair kids up. They took like 25 students and they did a daily check-in through an app with this Empower You, like, counselor, I think is what it was. And they didn't necessarily focus on, they didn't check grades and assignments. It was, did you do your daily check-in? And so through that, it might have been like they found out they needed a skill in how to cope with a classroom situation. And so they found that through those kinds of things, maybe they need a calming type technique or something like that to be able to know how to manage things. With that, they found that their grades and attendance got better. So it was just really interesting to be able to hear from some of those in the field experts as far as, like, okay, we know we have, like mental health, for example, but how do you measure that? Or what is it, those kinds of things, and what are the outcomes and stuff. So I found a lot of that super helpful. I brought a little handout for everybody if you just want to pass these around for each of the board members. As far as I just thought that this was something that they handed out and they gave other resources and things like that.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah.
Other board members that wanted to share?
I'll chime in. I was only able to attend on Thursday. I attended two different ones. What Tina didn't elaborate on is how the entire convention was set up. There was probably 200 rooms, I shouldn't say 200 rooms, about 50 to 70 different rooms, and they could accommodate somewhere between 500 and 500 people. The first one I picked was Title IX and transgender students, and that one was standing room only. Not only were all 250 seats filled, but there was 40 people up against the back wall. I don't want to say that was the most interesting topic because there was about 200 topics. Erin was there with me at that one, and I'm glad she was because we were able to debrief briefly afterwards. And I can tell you this, that the law regarding Title IX and transgender is very fluid. It's being written, and there is almost no way to do everything right. But as every single law in a new court case comes out, there are plenty of ways to do it wrong. So that is my summary. There is a very good slide or presentation that came with it that states every single statute, every emerging law, court cases, etc. And they give very, very detailed descriptions as to why it was ruled, where it was ruled, and how to interpret it. So anytime somebody comes to you about a bathroom or a name change, or should the parents be notified, first of all, besides reading all this stuff and trying to interpret it, call Erin. She actually knows how this stuff works. And if you don't get an answer from her or you don't believe her, I'd encourage you to find this presentation at the WASB website because it will more or less reinforce what she already knows. So don't take anything for granted. And I'm not saying don't use common sense, but we all know the court systems in America. Some things don't always make sense. So that's my summary on that. The other one I went to was secrecy in the business office or confidentiality in the business office. That one was not well attended. There was about 10 people in there. And it really addressed things regarding HIPAA and minor rights of students in what can and can't be shared with a school board, with teachers, et cetera. This was one, Sarah was she hired then? I think she had just been in her job. This was early January. I'm sure she was probably well versed on it, but I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Sarah about what I learned there. But that one was not as intriguing, but I'm sure just as important because we can get sued for that too. So.
All right, anyone else?
Sure.
Doug?
I was a delegate for our board, so I got the opportunity to go to the delegate convention, which I will never do again.
That's true. You won't.
Not because of that. I wouldn't want to go to that again. I just felt a lot of the resolutions that were brought up, which were way too many. We had like 340 delegates there, and there had to be 15 to 16 resolutions that dealt with a lot of stuff that was political. So then there was a lot of conversation about that one way or the other, just say like adding voting into our program, voting rights to educate the kids on voting, where we already have civics and government. So adding that little verbiage into that addition caused probably 45 minutes worth of discussion, one way or the other. So it got to be really long, and I didn't get to go to anything like you guys get to go to. So I was disappointed about that, but by the time we were done, we ran out of delegates that we didn't even have a quorum. They all left. I was the last one. I made it to the end.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Way to represent, Doug.
Yeah. Your vote, you couldn't even vote on the end on resolutions because there was too many of them. There wasn't a quorum, so they just read it quick. You know, that's it. We got it quick. Unbelievable. So I thought there was like the resolutions. I think for being board and what do we do to make our school better? I thought there would be more resolutions like literacy. Let's just say that one. Well, here's a program that schools are using to better their literacy. Why don't we all use this program or some sort of it? You know, yeah, all of us, every board, well, let's pick this literacy program, this one, that one. Well, it gets to be, you would think that through the whole state, that board, the WASB would come up, hey, this program is really working at 50 of our education districts, and maybe this would be something to do. I was hoping there would be more of that kind of to help our education system be better, and it got to be more on the political side, like guns on campus. We already have, there's rules of guns on campus, and then some of the schools have trap shooting. So what do you do with that? Or archery in their FIAD programs, that's a weapon. So can you have that? So that was another 45 minutes discussing something like that. So I think they missed the mark. Sorry to be a downer to Tina's. I think the rest of it, like I went to things like you did the other years, and I really enjoyed that too. It's good to learn a lot of the different things that are out
So
there.
Doug, with your departure, who's volunteering to be the delegate
I
next
don't know.
year?
I'm not gonna-
Yeah, that was
You guys can go experience it. Maybe after this, they'll learn your lesson, only have 2 or 3 on there, and it'll be a great time. You can go and enjoy it. But I don't know. Sorry about that, but I stayed till the end and voted as best I could.
Thank you for representing us.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Other announcements and recognition?
None at this time.
Okay, then we will move on to strategic discussion, and we will talk about enrollment projections.
We do have Sarah, I believe, online. And I believe we're getting her into the Zoom. And Tyler, if we could also increase the, so we can see that a little bit better, that'd be great.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Sarah.
Great. So this is an enrollment projection that I shared with the fiscal committee. There are multiple different ways to project enrollment, like we talked about at fiscal. This method is a method that the district has used in the past, and it's called the cohort survival method. And what it does is it looks at several years of past actual enrollment numbers, and then figures out a percentage of how many students move from one grade to the next, and then projects that forward for several years. So using this method, the projection for next year is a headcount decrease of 51 students, which seems pretty much in line with what we've been experiencing in the district. So it seems like it's probably fairly accurate. That said, enrollment really is difficult to project. We've had some interesting years, some outlier kind of years, and so the actual number could certainly come in higher or lower than that, but I think that this gives us a pretty good baseline for budgeting and just starting to plan for next year. I don't know if anyone had questions about that.
And again, we did review this at fiscal. This is something we look at every year. It is one, of course, the key inputs into the budget process. That's why we're talking about it now, because what's going to happen very, very soon is you're going to start hearing about budgets. And this is a key factor in that. And I agree with what Sarah said in terms of the projections are in line with the last few years. We do have that one outlier year of a big drop there from COVID, but prior to that year and after that year, you see a similar general trend. It is simply representative of the community overall.
I was going to ask that, Tony. Have we
Yep.
correlated this with any other demographics from Jefferson, Dodge,
Oh,
Watertown,
absolutely.
the state?
Yeah.
And how tight is the correlation with what we're seeing in Watertown with overall
Yeah.
demographics of Jefferson, Dodge, as well as Wisconsin overall? And obviously by age group. We know Wisconsin's getting older, so the fact that we're getting more seniors doesn't mean correlate positively with less children, but there's less childbearing families or less immigration of other families into Wisconsin, et cetera.
So in the time that I've been on the board, I believe 3 times we have engaged an outside group to perform a population-based study. And these numbers remain consistent with what was been the midline of those projections.
Okay. So it's a high correlation.
High correlation, and again, that what they look at is primarily birth rates
Yep.
more than anything else, but also looking at your census data in those, particularly in the 0 to 5 track. Those under a year old and up to 5 years, that is your heaviest predictor of what you're going to end up with in terms of school-age population. It is also, we've also looked at this and compared it to the other schools in our community, and I can tell you that most of the parochials have seen a similar drop. There have been a few that have seen substantial gains because of aggressive campaigns that they've done, but overall, the parochial population has also declined in line with this, and it is entirely in line with the overall census demographic trend for the Watertown area, which is, while the overall population is relatively stable, the age composition of that has shifted and continues to shift older and older and older. So we end up with more in the 45 plus and fewer in the 18 and younger. And that has been that way essentially since the Great Recession. So prior to the Great Recession, we were actually seeing a significant increase year over year in school-age families. And the Great Recession put a stop to that, and we have not seen a recovery from that since.
No, thank you. And I was hoping that, I don't want to say hoping that that was the case. I'm glad that we've looked at that. Only other question, whether it be for Jared or for Sarah, if we were able to do that again, or even in the past, have we found the situations where we found communities or school districts more specifically that bucked the trend? What are the school districts that are doing that are counter demographics?
So if you look at Wisconsin overall, it is a tale of two districts. There is a small group, I'm going to say less than 15% of the districts, 15 by a number of districts, that are growing. And they represent communities that have been growing. Sun Prairie, you know, all those things that you see. Oconomowoc, certainly. You can't look at Paps Farm and not recognize the huge amount of growth occurring in that community. All the rest of us are seeing this, and particularly the more rural you are,
The worse it gets.
the worse it gets. And so, yes, by number of districts, the vast majority of districts in Wisconsin are suffering this same dynamic. Overall in Wisconsin, it is less of an overall drop in school age, but the population is shifting to other areas is the net result. So you have a high concentration of a certain group of communities that are winning and everyone else is losing.
There's one other trend that is out there, and it's the rural school districts that, for one reason or another, have embraced some kind of immigration. For instance, Arcadia, a lot of the immigration started there with the poultry industry.
And Ashley Furniture.
Yep, Ashley Furniture, then came on and started looking for those immigrant groups to move in because they needed labor. Whitewater, same thing. I think there's 127 new Hispanic students just this year in Whitewater. So there are some school districts that are outliers in that regard, where an immigrant population is moving in and being encouraged and welcomed, and they're getting explosions in that regard.
Okay.
I think there's still one thing in, you know, obviously we care about what the future looks like, but in the past is that there has been stability that has come to this. We had big classes that last year was kind of the last big class to graduate. And you kind of look at the data as it goes from year to year, and we're actually are seeing some headway on some classes, on the majority of the classes and so forth. So there is movement when you get into the data at a more granular level. We look at the big picture.
Well, and I didn't, Dave, so are there, I mean, we're decreasing, but is the decreasing slowing on any cohort?
Well, I mean, you can look at the cohorts and follow, you know, diagonally down as to what happens. And you can see, you know, most of them this past year increased.
Yeah,
in the cohorts.
Whenever you see the survival rate above 100%, that means there's some positive movement. When it's below 100%, then there's not.
Okay.
And so, you know, you can take a look at, you know, where we're seeing some of those successes or some of those survival rates predicated on the last 5 years. I think, is that right there? 5 years? Yeah, 5 years. And then those are cast forward to the next 5, those same survival rates.
It's also important to note for our district in particular, that at grades 8 and 9 is particularly where you see an influx of students moving out of parochial into our schools. So you will almost always have an incoming freshman class at the high school that was larger than the 8th grade class, because you have students moving out of parochial and into the public high school. Other questions or comments on this item? Again, you will hear more about it further as we move through the budget process. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
And we will move on to reports. Let's start with the superintendent's report.
Okay, so here's our report for February.
Go ahead.
Ooh. Too fast. Okay, so a little bit of recognition. I just wanted to put this out there, and I know this was on our Facebook page, but I think this kind of achievement really needs to be celebrated, especially at our level, as a board level. Watertown High School Visual Arts Classics team took first place at Carroll University on regionals. wasn't last Saturday, it was Saturday before that. But they also won first place in the Art History Quiz Bowl and other first place prizes. But when you see that kind of achievement, those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, things that we like to shout out for, and it's a really good job. Opportunities. Today, I had the opportunity to meet with a bunch of regional leaders. This photo was taken around 2 o'clock today. That's why I'm looking the same in that photo is right in front of you. But what we did is we met with the Greater Health Foundation's Every Child Thrives Initiative group, and that's what we are. And we met today to discuss our plan and strategies for moving forward with the mission of Every Child Thrives. If you want to know more about Every Child Thrives and what we do, I put a link there for you, and this will be attached into our board minutes so that you'll be able to see that. But you can go to the Watertown Health Foundation's Every Child Thrives to see what we do. There are a group of us that are organizing to look for and meet more with people around the second generation movement, or hashtag Gen 2. If you want to learn more about that, just let me know and I can send you some materials. But there is an opportunity for us to meet with people in Washington, D.C. on April 11th and 12th. And so there's a group of us that are going to go down there, learn more about that movement, but also talk to some other funders. And when I'm talking about funders, I'm talking big funders who are looking for a community who has already a group of people together and are moving in that direction. And we have a group of people together and we're moving in that direction. So we're also going out there to shake hands and talk about the Greater Health Foundation over the last couple of years. Over the last year and a half, what we've really been specifically focused on and doing for Every Child Thrives initiative in our community, and seeing if we can get some more regional dollars put towards Watertown. So it was kind of really a neat opportunity that I wanted to share with you today. Other opportunities. On February 17th, the middle school and high school teachers worked again with CESA 2 representative to do some piloting for illustrative math. You have to remember that back on the, I think it was 27th of December, just before break. No, not 27th, 21st of December, just before break. They also got together with CESA 2 and they kind of went through a 6th grade lesson. Well, this is them now learning how to pilot the materials and do that. So I just wanted to share that opportunity is moving forward. We also had our people from ELA meet with Aaron as well as Mary Jo Ziegler from CESA 2 to talk a little bit more about how to look at the gaps within the standards of the ELA program at the high school level and figure out what our next steps are as they realign that curriculum. And then also some important dates and reminders. You can tell I'm doing a pitch for the Legally Blonde. It's coming up on the 10th and through the 12th. I don't know if I can share this, but I'm going to. I have got a special guest lined up to come on the 11th to view the program. It happens to be our state superintendent of schools is coming. We're going to go out for dinner and then go to Legally Blonde. And she wants to meet the cast and really be able to, meet with the kids, see it, and do all that. So that's really a pretty big deal. I mean, the state superintendent of schools, they got a pretty full calendar. So being very choosy on this is the place that they want to come to celebrate the arts and education, I think that's going to be huge. And I hope she can make it. Sometimes our state superintendent signs up for things and then has to pull out last minute just because that's sometimes what politics does. But I'm really hopeful that she'll be able to make it and be able to come in and see what our students can do through that kind of a program. And then also there's just the other dates up there. Just want to remind you that spring break is at the end of the month. So that's going to shift our whole calendar forward a little bit. And so make sure that you take a look at those dates and take note of them. And then also March 10th is the last day of the second trimester at the high school. Any questions?
But one comment, tertiary to my involvement on this board, I'm also on the Watertown Family Connections Board. And we found out yesterday or on late Friday that Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez would be in town. She toured the library this morning. So myself, Fred Yount, the mayor, Steph Curtis, Carol Quest, Peg Checkeye, all the opportunity. And she came here for a lot of the same reasons. The people in your picture up there with Every Child Thrives, along with Kim and Tina and John Lang, et cetera, from the Health Foundation and the YMCA. Lieutenant Governor was here today to also visit Watertown. So that was just good information for people to know. I got to shake her hand and then I stood in the far back and wasn't talking to the rest of the time. So that's about what I expected, but I was asked to attend, so I did.
Last thing is just a reminder that this month, February is CTE month. You have one more day tomorrow to thank a CTE person. So if you haven't yet done so, make sure you see if you can get around and do that.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on that report? Okay, then we'll move on to fiscal management.
Okay. Fiscal management, we had our meeting on February 22nd. All the members were there. Also present was Tony Arnett, Superintendent Burke, Stacy Riedel, and Sarah Duncan, and Supervisor of Grounds, Josh Cotter, and also Domer was there. So good for him.
First.
This guy right here.
Don't. No first name.
Well, that's what he goes
That's
by.
what he goes by.
I know.
I got a text from him that says signed Dover.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so first off, we had the payment report, went through that. A couple of committee members came up with some good suggestions. One was to look at the Amazon account and all the purchases that are done through that, and just get a rough idea of the detail on that. And then also the discussion was on outsourcing some of our educational services to agencies in the area. Want to get a little bit bigger, better handle on how that whole the policy and the procedures go on that. So we're going to look into that a little farther down the road here in the near future. Variance report, just looked at that. Everything seems to be on task there. Sarah came up with a nice little summary of that. Everything seems to be in order on as far as our budget goes and the percentages that are going on. Expenditures over 20,000. We had a couple of them on the list. Actually, there was 3 of them that came to mind, and the one for we're moving forward. There's a resolution tonight for the grant application, the Wisconsin Fast Forward grant application that Mr. Domer is going to be probably, I don't know, are you talking about that tonight at all or no? All right, so it's on a resolution tonight for a laser CNC table. And then also we recommended a resolution for the bleachers at the RMS Middle School. Was another one that was brought to the fiscal committee, but we thought it was best to run that back through Educational Services Committee. It was a committee for children, SEL curriculum, so we thought that would be better to run that through there to make sure it's all what we want to do. And when it comes back to fiscal, we can throw that as a resolution if need be. And then there was a couple other ones that were on there that we talked about. Student enrollment, we went through that tonight. We had that at our fiscal meeting. And then the budget process, I believe Tony and Dr. Burke and David and Sarah, I believe, were involved in putting some, just some budgetary recommendations as far as what we're going to use for that, assumptions in our budget process going forward here. So that was very great that they did all of that work ahead of time. So Sarah has some direction and we have direction in setting our budget. HVAC update was good news from Josh as far as that goes, that we secured and came in at budget, and also it's on schedule. So German was at 742.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions on that report? Okay, then we'll move on to HR.
Great, we had a meeting on February 20th at 5:30 p.m. Let's see, we reviewed the consent agenda as far as staff resignations, retirements, appointments, so we do have a resolution on that tonight. We also went over administrator contract renewals. There is a resolution for that tonight as well. We just kind of discussed from a little bit of an education piece, just so that we knew as far as the administrative contracts, those are every 2 years. Everything looked very standard as far as what was included with those things, and looks very standard as far as the resolution for this evening. We talked a lot about our employee satisfaction survey. This is something that it's an employee satisfaction survey given through the company school perceptions to all of the district staff. And then we take that, that data and then review it at the HR meeting and, okay, let's take a look at this. What does this mean? What do we, what can we learn from this, and what opportunities are presented in this? And so our discussion went around the last, I think it's 4 or 5 years, correct me if I'm wrong, we have had a custom survey that WSC, like the HR, I think, committee had put together. And so this company offers, you can design a custom survey, or they have a standard survey that they put out. And so a number of years ago, there was custom survey that measured things that we were interested in. Since then, the company has done research and things like that, come up with new and relevant questions on their standard survey. And so we took a look as far as, do we want to go forward with the standard survey, which the benefit on that is that we can compare data to other districts and things like that, or do we want to keep going forward with our custom survey? And so as a committee, a lot of time was spent going through the questions and being able to meld things and stuff like that. And so we came up with a standard plus survey, I think is what we called it, which is on the resolution for tonight. So we put a lot of thought into it. What we went with, we really valued the standard survey questions that the company had come up with. They researched, like, this is what they do. They're professionals in this. But we also wanted to take some questions from our custom survey so that we would have that longitudinal data. And the ones that we kept really revolved around things that we thought would be important to the board as far as student respect, compensation, and administrative leadership. So you will see that agenda or resolution on the agenda for tonight as far as approving going forward with the employee satisfaction survey. We also talked about the negotiations planning process update, being that the numbers for CPI came forward. And as a committee, we're really looking for clarification of the process as far as to develop the salary proposal for the collective bargaining purposes. We understand timelines may shift, and that whole process has changed a little bit in the last few years and things like that, but looking for a process as far as board decision making. And so Superintendent Burke will work with the committee, board leadership, and the Director of Business Services and Human Resources to develop and communicate a process for this year. Then we discussed the Employee Wellness Committee update. Margaret has done a lot of really great work for us on this. It started out as something we wanted to take a look at in relation to having healthy people and how maybe that may impact health insurance and premiums, budgets, those kinds of things. And so it's exciting. It sounds like it's been put out there, and there's positive feedback regarding that. So that will continue in its development stage. And then we discussed, as far as agenda planning is concerned, to potential future topics for summer school, the employee satisfaction survey timeline, which we will do in March. We're also looking forward to a legal presentation about the contracting renewal and non-renewal process. That will actually be taking place in April. So for anybody who wants to be informed regarding that, that will happen in April, and we adjourned at 7:33.
Thank you. Comments or questions on that report? Very well. Educational services.
Sure. So that meeting occurred on February 14th. All members were present, plus a few extras. We talked about, let's see, the ELL curriculum, which is on the budget for tonight. It is under $20,000, but it was ESSER dollars, hence it being brought forth for resolution. Got a pretty good update on the K-12 curriculum adoption review. I encourage you to read that paragraph in full and in depth to make sure you're on board and understanding on the timing of all that stuff. There will be a pilot later this spring. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to ask Aaron or Diana when I'm concluded. We discussed the AVID elective, and as well as how does AVID apply to the rest of the teaching and our goals, strategic, and also how that ties into Y-Core. We will be revisiting AVID again in future meetings. And then lastly was just a bit of, I hate to just say administrative detail, which was just the renewal of the Endeavor Charter School charter, the 5-year renewal, which has been done, well, I think it's been renewed once, and this is the second renewal, right? So this is the third renewal?
Second renewal.
Second renewal, see? Third 5-year period, second renewal. And that was a recommendation to be brought forth here as well, which is a resolution as well. And then we concluded. And the next one is a short circuit because of the pulled up board meeting. So that will be next week. Any questions? And once again, I encourage you to fully understand the K-12 adoption timeline and ask Diane or Aaron if you have any questions on that.
Can I just interject one thing? There are a couple of time sensitive items that I think would necessitate inclusion on the March 7th agenda. That's actually 1 week from tomorrow coming up, like you said, David. We do have the second step SEL curriculum that Doug had mentioned that came out of fiscal into ed services. And then, yeah, eCampus international enrollments. There's some developments here that I think we need to discuss in terms of agreements with LLCs that are internationally based, and I'm developing these agreements with legal language, and I just want to make sure that folks have a chance to look at this and we have a chance to discuss what that is. Yeah.
On that topic, I mean, obviously it's an ed services meeting, that's where it's going to start, but there's going to be a lot of legal and fiscal aspects of that in order to be responsive and quick. Is there anything else that we need to do, Dave, to make sure that we can do this quickly as opposed to waiting for 3 cycles to get to a decision?
Yeah, right. I mean, I've laid a lot of the groundwork already, so it's just going to be a matter of what's there, things like our tuition schedule, just what's happening and the rate at which it's happening. I think there's a real opportunity here for the district to dive into new markets. And so there are things that we're currently doing. The difference here is that we would potentially be directly contracting with these LLCs, and that's kind of a new thing for us. So that means we're invoicing, and doing things that to this point, U.S. University Pathways has been kind of an intermediary for us. They're the group that you recall last year we partnered with, who brought us students. We had a unique connection with them. Nobody else in the state is doing this, and I think that's an important distinction to make too. So we have a chance to build on that. But what we're seeing now are families independently reaching out to eCampus and saying, hey, we want to bypass some of the, the middle entanglements and work directly with you if we can. And so it's a new development, and we're entering into those kinds of agreements and arrangements. I want to make sure you're aware so that we're prepared to do this as we have been, but at a broader scale. So,
okay.
The other thing I just mentioned too are under ESSER updates. We have some time sensitive matters with respect to an E-rate application for our network infrastructure upgrades. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. We have a chance in March. April, we have the K-12 MAP recommendation and advanced learner program update. So a lot that's going on there as well. So sorry to
no, I'm glad you
make sure that we covered something.
I like a full room when we have that meeting. So now you just wet the whistle of everybody to show up.
Yeah, right. So, all right, thank you.
Where is that at?
I think, that's one thing. I mean, it's not that we're not going to rotate when it's appropriate, but we're going to try to have those ed services meetings more often than not in this building. And attendance may dictate the conference room. If there's something topical or that really benefits us from being at Webster, Douglas, or Lebanon, or the high school, we'll move out to those locations for tours just to make sure we get some hands-on and boots on the ground. But we found, or at least I found, that competing with the Bell schedule, Lori and I standing in the hallway waiting to get with all the students, announcements and the comings and goings, and it just, and then the AV and IT, it just makes it a more efficient meeting to have it in this building. But that doesn't mean we won't move it elsewhere, but it won't rotate nearly as often as what it used to. So unless it's posted otherwise, Dave, I always plan on it. None of those topics benefit from being in a particular building, Doug, so I would say that it would likely be here.
Conference room 2 or 3 has been working, I think it's 3, but I don't have to let me know all around, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
All right, questions or comments on that report? Thank you. Policy?
Sure. Policy met on February 15th. The workflow, for lack of a better word, we don't have a policy on how to conduct a policy meeting, so I'll just call it workflow, is continuing to work well for us. The first item up was for discussion, which was a policy that Diana Johnson had sponsored, and that was grading systems and reports. The discussion on that are in your meeting minutes, and that will be moving to major revision for the next meeting in April. Then there were 2 for major revision. One was the anti-bullying policy sponsored by Lori Holland, and then the 5105 class size sponsored by Jared Burke. Those were both discussed. After some additional revisions, I believe, on the major revisions, and Lori and Jared, correct me on that, that one is not up for first read tonight. We had a couple of small things that we had put in there, or did it make the first read?
So I got it back from the attorney.
Oh, that's right, we were gonna try to get, okay, we were gonna try to get it to the attorneys, and if we could get it in today, we would have, but in the short time period.
So I haven't had a chance to see
Okay.
if there was any substantial changes or not. If there are, I think we should review those at policy before it comes, but if there's not, then we'll bring it to Monday, or excuse me, March's board meeting.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I forgot that we more or less put forth, we agreed with everything that Lori had done with some small changes, but we wanted legal to review it, and due to the short time period, couldn't get it into a first read tonight, waiting on legal's review. Class size, we discussed it at length, and then Jared's going to do a little bit of homework on that and bring it back again for another discussion at the next April meeting. All the ones for first read tonight are all minor revisions, and the 2 noted, so those are in for a resolution tonight on minor revisions. And then I'll just note that the next one for discussion is 5330, sponsored by Tina, and that's for extracurricular activities. And then after that, Craig is in the queue for some of the policies that we're approving tonight, the minor revisions to those policies, but we'll take those back up for full discussion, I believe, in June. And that's 5230 through 5240, predominantly having to do with retention and graduation. And the next meeting is on April 12th.
Thank you. Comments or questions on that report? All right, and Doug, is there anything you want to cover in the planning?
We didn't have a planning meeting.
Right. We want to do a preview of the forthcoming meeting.
I didn't do a preview for the
Okay.
Well, I can tell you that at that meeting, Doreen Dembski is going to be here, and she is going to take the opportunity to interview the members of the committee and any other board member as part of the communication audit to use as a a group that she's going to interview. So a good part of the meeting will be her going through that interview process with you to gather information to inform the audit. So that's going to be the major part of that meeting. So if any other board member wants to come be part of that interview process, then that's going to be available to you.
All right, thank you. Then we will move on to the to the consent agenda, resolution 9178. The consent agenda includes the board meeting minutes, the board committee summaries. Under staffing, it includes resignations, retirements, and appointments. There, the approval of bills and first and second reading of policies. Tonight, there are first readings of policies as noted, but there are no second readings. Do I hear a motion on the consent agenda, Resolution 9178?
So moved.
Moved by Tina. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Craig Worthing,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Tony Arnett.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next, under our action items, we have Resolution 9179. This is purchase of English language learner and dual language materials, as previously discussed from Ed Services. Do I hear a motion on 9179?
So moved.
Moved by David Schrader. Do I hear a second?
Second. Second.
Second by Lori. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Worthing,
Yes.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Diana Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next is Resolution 9180. This is the renewal of the Endeavor Charter School contract, another 5-year term. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Moved by Tina, seconded by David Smith.
I got a little higher pitch.
Comments or questions on the motion? Again, this was discussed at Ed Services. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Next is Resolution 9181, the Employee Satisfaction Survey. Again, as discussed in the HR report. Do I hear a motion on 9181?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Tina, seconded by comments or questions on the motion?
What brings a survey as a resolution to board?
So
What's the criteria that brought it here?
Yeah, prior survey was also, the questions as a group were approved by the board. So it felt appropriate since we were changing the questions to make sure there was board approval as previous.
So when do we approve surveys that are sent out by the school district, and when don't we? This is
Yeah, so as
typically
we-
an odd one.
I can recall in previous instances when it is a board-initiated survey, it has been approved by the board. When it is an administrative level survey, it has typically not had the same level. But again, this was a board-initiated vehicle in its beginning, and that's why it sat with us.
Is this the only one that the board holds?
It's a fair question.
On an ongoing basis, yes.
Okay.
In prior instances, we have done surveys prior to, for example, doing a referendum, in which case that also was approved by the board.
It's a fair question, one that, we also talked about administratively, because I'm not used to that being a product of, the surveys always getting approved by the board, but it's good to hear the difference.
Right.
Margaret?
So in 1819, we switched the contents of the survey itself to, and also started using school perceptions. At one point, there was a board decision to start using that format. And then in subsequent years, since adopting that format, I always bring a timeline to the HR committee to say, here's the survey, here's the timeline, and then the, just to get it out there in terms of the HR committee, knowing what we're doing in the HR world operationally. But this is a new survey question, which we had had sample, both the old and the new were published in the HR committee meetings.
I do have one more comment if it's appropriate. There are school districts that do have a policy on surveying. They tend to outline what we're saying here, which is if it's a board directed survey, those get approved by the board. And if it has content that students would be taking that the board, like the YRDS or something like that, sometimes boards want to see those because of the political nature of what might be asked of a minor. And so sometimes they identify those that are, you know, kind of, that would be in that kind of realm. But
Perhaps something for the
Just
policy
thoughts.
committee to look at, whether we should have a policy on that or not.
Are you sponsoring that?
Sound like it.
Tony, that was good, sir.
Sounds like,
Nice job. Oh, that was good, Doug. That
sounds
was
like you
good.
might.
Tony's like, no.
That's good.
No, I was volunteering.
Okay. I would go so far as to say, Lynn should add that to the backlog. So put it over there. Well, we're through June right now. We're sure we can pull it up in August.
All right, any other comments or questions on resolution 9181?
Oh, Lord.
Hearing none other, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Next is resolution 9182. These are easements at Douglas and Schurz Elementary School for TDS Telecom. Do I hear a motion? Moved by Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by David Schrader. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
David Smith.
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Tina Johnson.
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next is resolution 9183. This is the approval of the Wisconsin Fast Forward Grant for the purchase of equipment for the technical education program. Do I hear a motion on 9183?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Doug, second by Diana.
No, Mike,
Oh, Mike, sorry.
Who seconded?
Diana.
Comments or questions on the motion? Again, this was discussed at fiscal.
So just to discuss the fiscal, this is to receive the grant that will then take a stage to go and get firmed up bids for use of table that will then most likely have ESSER dollars attached to that. So it's kind of,
Yes.
setting that all in motion.
Yes, thank you. This is for the grant. The purchase will come subsequently. All right. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Wortman,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Tony Arnett.
Yes, and the motion carries. Next is resolution 9184, purchase of Airco BMK 1000 pool boiler from Technique Mechanical. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Tina,
Second.
seconded by Mike. And as discussed at fiscal, comments or questions on the motion?
All hearing of the boiler replacement on past discussions, was this a new break that needed to happen? I mean, that not needed to happen, but needed to be replaced. So this was not something that was a known bad actor.
No,
Okay.
it's newer this fall.
Okay.
Both of them aren't in very good shape. Boiler number one, is what I'm gonna determine is number one, had some fixes and is running okay. Boiler number two, we're no good anymore. We need them to be running.
Yeah.
So,
No, I just was, I don't want to say surprised, I just didn't remember hearing them before.
It was unexpected.
That's what I was
Unplanned.
unplanned, that's what I was getting to. Okay.
And the status of the city's participation is still up in the air.
Yes. Technically, we have an agreement with them. that shared is a shared cost agreement on the pool. We are discussing back and forth some of the shared costs that have been billed prior to from the school district and whether or not those need to be billed or needed to be billed. This may be one of those things where if the school pays the whole cost at this point in time, maybe we can stop here, start the slate clean and talk about what the new shared costs are going to be as we move forward. Because there has been some question about how much staffing we've billed to the city in the past, whether or not that confines or conforms to what they believe should be the amount of staffing needed and everything else. And so we're working through a process and it's on a positive note for us to be talking about that. We talk about that and a lot of other things that we share. We'll be working with the Parks and Rec on their agreement coming up and everything else. So I would say that this one is probably going to be 100% on the school district as one of those good faith tools that we're going to be talking about back and forth. So.
All right, any other questions on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Craig Orton,
Yes.
Doug Will,
Yes.
David Smith,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Lori Holland.
Yes.
And the motion carries. And our last resolution for this evening is 9185, purchase of Intercal telescoping bleachers from the Goodson Company. This is for the middle school. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Craig, second.
Second.
Seconded by Mike. Comments or questions on the motion? And again, this is in coordination with replacement of that floor as well. So really the two do go hand in hand. You don't go run old bleachers on top of a new floor.
Right. Does the new floor have a schedule or
Yeah.
is that all planned in? Okay, cool.
All right. So the comments or questions on this motion, then roll call vote, please.
Doug Will,
Yes.
Craig Orton,
Yes.
Tony Arnett,
Yes.
Mike Higgins,
Yes.
Lori Holland,
Yes.
Diana Johnson,
Yes.
Tina Johnson,
Yes.
David Schrader,
Yes.
David Smith.
Yes.
And the motion carries. This brings us to the second portion of our agenda where people may address the board. If there's anyone present here that would like to address the board? Nope. Anyone online? All right. I did not capture any items during our discussion for future board meeting agendas, so therefore I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tina. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.